Hi, this is Alan Wheeler. Sorry for the short delay. This is my YouTube channel where recently I've been recording videos on tarot and spirituality. The title of this one will be something like Deviant Moon on Political Polarization, which I still consider a bit of a spiritual topic from my angle. Here's a bit of theme music. Alexa, resume. Alexa, pause. So that's my advanced high tech there going on for the background music. Recently, I've also been showing something from my altar, and here's a Christmas present from my daughter, and she painted this dystopian scene. She told me these are robot birds on this dark violet cityscape here. And so that haunting picture I have up here above my altar. So I drew a Occam stick with one of the Occam symbols on it and 3 cards from the Deviant Moon tarot, which I often mispronounce tarot, so forgive me for that. But as I was reflecting here coming into the new year and saw some of J.J. Abrams' replies to criticism for his recent Star Wars movie, he made an interesting comment to me and said about the fans complaining about different details and the critics complaining about different things. J.J. Abrams said, they're all right. All of them are right. And because the way that they receive or understand that his creation are all legitimate responses. But he also said that he finds that we live today in a culture of complaining, and that people even assemble themselves around different complaints. And he made the comment that he went into this creation knowing that it's impossible to please everyone. So he had to make some decisions, artistic decisions. As I reflected on this, I thought about how polarized our country becomes all the time, with red states and blue states. And I was reminded also of Jim Carrey on a talk show, who I believe he's fairly liberal, but he came on and he said that he draws the line in his politics when it destroys relationships, and he says he wants to consider himself friends of people from all beliefs and all political views. And I found that refreshing. He also said realistically, some of his friends he may consider to be idiots if they disagree with him, but yet isn't that the way it is with family? That we can have strong disagreements, but we're still hopefully existing in some kind of harmony. I was also reminded of driving to the bank the other day. A car pulled in right in front of me to the same parking lot I was going to, and on the left side was a coexist bumper sticker, and it looked better than a lot of the ones I've seen. Each letter was actually the real symbol from a religion, from a different religion, spelling out the word coexist. Just a little bit better done than many of those that I've seen. And on the right side of the bumper, what in big black letters were the words "not a liberal." I found this unusual for the college town I live in, and so when I saw the gentleman getting out of his car, I asked him about that. I said, "Are these your bumper stickers? That's quite an unusual combination." And uh, as the words were leaving my mouth, I saw he had a big letters on his ski cap with an American flag promoting Trump, but it was too late. Um, I didn't want to get into a political discussion, in other words. But still refreshingly, he told me, yes, those are my bumper stickers, but I think we need to have dialogue. I think we need to um, kind of stop the polarization and have real discussions. So I was telling this story to a friend of mine, talking long distance on the telephone, who was raised in Texas, and he's very conservative, but he himself cannot stand President Trump. And so he, um, I don't know the details, but at some point he draws the line. And uh, so these are just two examples that are a little bit outside of the strictly polarized party line positions that we sometimes find. My friend, as I was talking to him, he was a history major and worked with intelligence in the Army for some time. And he told me he's quite concerned with the state of the, I guess, the rhetoric that we see in social media and in all media. And he said that it's got all the characteristics of a real civil war. And um, that's, from his point of view, is a concerning thing. So, with these things on my mind, I came into the uh, tarot reading, um, asking how the cards can help me consider and think about these issues. And I drew from my new set of Occams sticks. These were, I mentioned in a previous video, these are Irish runes, I guess you'd call them, and each one stands for a letter and a tree. And in this particular set, each symbol is carved from the tree that it represents. So if it, for example, if it's an apple tree, it's carved from the wood of an apple tree. And so earlier I drew one of these Oham symbols. And the symbol that I drew was this one, Alim. I'm probably mispronouncing that, which represents the elm tree. And the elm tree is one of the tallest, a very tall tree. And so one of the meanings that this can carry is the height of vision, a perspective from a very high level, like the hawk that can fly over and see the big picture. That has a vast scope and considers everything across the landscape. And so one of the things this symbol speaks to me is to take that higher ground, that larger perspective, and to consider all sides. This tree can also be found planted along the boundaries of properties, and so it could also suggest having good boundaries, having safe boundaries, or perhaps just to consider the effects of drawing those boundary lines in these issues of political polarization and taking sides. So I thought it was a very poignant symbol to draw considering this question. I drew 3 cards from the Deviant Moon Tarot. And the first card was the 4 of Wands. And here in the background, supported by 4, it looks like tree trunks, is a growing vegetation that is the home of these 2 characters. And this speaks to me in several ways. One is that this is something political parties provide when we join in a group. It does provide that kind of stability. And we know a house divided against itself cannot stand. And sometimes even this card can represent marriage. And we know that in history, sometimes political alliances were formed by marriage. But here, I don't know if you can make out, but their hands are bound together by ivy. And I find that very significant, as ivy can represent connection, but also constriction. So it can also constrain them. And so, although it's very powerful, joining together with like-minded people, sometimes a kind of a group mentality or groupthink can take over. So getting stuck in that is that stagnation could be the danger of the 4s, or in this case, the 4 of Wands. So that's the first card. The next 2 cards were swords, and I'll start with the 3 of Swords. And here, sometimes I'm left feeling this way, just pierced to the heart by the disagreements and divisions I see, almost as if it were a civil war, almost sometimes brother against brother and sister against sister, people who were certainly all Americans, all part of humanity, but there's such division. And here she is, pierced through the heart there. Reading in the guidebook, it describes her touching her finger to the tip of one of these swords, trying to see if the pain is real or an illusion, all in her mind. And so swords being of the air element and relating to communication and thinking, words and concepts, ideas, I think that's a very telling. She's testing to see, although she has that black tear and seems to feel the pain of it, how much of it is self-created. And The swords always remind me of the words, "The one who lives by the sword will die by the sword," and sometimes we suffer the effects as well as give the effects in the sword suit. So this is the problem. In the Two of Swords, I see more of a dialogue and dialectic, and here it's a little bit less balanced, and the three swords are piercing the heart at this stage. And that's very telling to me. Also, it's the perhaps this, along with the Queen of Swords, are probably the most watery of the sword cards to me, and that this card is often interpreted as regarding the heart, the heart piercing going on here. The effects, although it may be words and ideas and communication, it seems to be having those emotional effects here. Similarly, I drew the Queen of Swords, and being that feminine element, this card also brings kind of the passive water element into consideration. Although I find it interesting in Patrick Valence's version here, she's holding two swords. They're crossing similar to the way swords cross in the Two of Swords, as if she has that internal conflict or turmoil, that cognitive dissonance going on, that these kind of disagreements can produce. I don't know if it comes across on the camera here, but from the end of her sword, there's dripping a little blood there. And this reminds me that this can be either harm her sharpness causes to others, but it can also be her own pain, as we see in the Three of Swords. And we know the old proverb that hurt people hurt people. And so it's a two-way street. It can go both ways here. Another thing that this card speaks to me is passive aggression that can sometimes it's not so passive, but that can come out in because we don't always like to discuss politics openly, although there are public forums and much openness. But sometimes the effects are less direct, and I'm reminded of some of the detrimental effects that can come about when the discussion, when the dialectic becomes unhealthy. And so when facts become unimportant, or facts are twisted, or the news is sold by what group produces it, what ideology produces it, not by necessarily in the old ideal of old school journalism, where it's objective. Although we probably never had objective journalism, that was a goal. And now many people buy their news based on the group, the party, and the mindset that it comes from. And so these kind of effects come out, and is a kind of passive aggression or unintended consequence of our political system. So I'll stop here because there's a lot to think about, a lot more that could be said. But it's something that weighs on me. I think having the freedom of open dialogue and open discussion is a good thing. But I do see how it becomes detrimental sometimes in our society today. And hopefully it would never lead to something like a real civil war, although people become quite combative at times in their ideas. So I hope for better things in the coming year, and leave you with that food for thought. As always, I hope that you have a connection with people in your life, with online community, and on your spiritual path, whatever that might be. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.